Whether there are people who do have £5 lying around, who have some money lying around, would you buy a heat pump on the basis of a 5% cut in VAT? VAT on it has gone from 5 to 0. Would that incentivise you to buy a heat pump, to start the energy transition, create the market around it, and move us to a cleaner, greener, more secure, energy-secure future? Come to your calls in just a moment. Tom Burke joins us, chair of the E3G think tank. He was formerly an advisor to the UK government on environmental policy. Thanks for being there again, Tom. This transition's proving a little bumpy, isn't it, by what we're hearing from government?
I'd say so. And you're right, it is a bit of an odd proposition to put to people, but it's not the only odd proposition we've just seen. Why would you build nuclear power stations, which will mean you have to put bills up twice in order to get people to invest in them? Why would you do that? Why would you think that was a good idea to suggest to people right in the middle of a crisis of bills right now? And by the way, you mentioned about the French have 70 reactors. Yeah, but 16 of them are offline at the moment because they have faults. Right. So you want to make absolutely sure you've got reactors that are going to work before you invest heavily like the French have done.
The point about the nuclear energy, just explain that, the idea that the cost is being met up front by people paying more on their bills for the building of some of these power plants.
Yeah, this is the two things, actually. The first piece, the legislation that just got the royal assent on Friday, means that every electricity customer will have a levy on their bills in order to pay for the construction of the nuclear power stations that the government wants to build. And then, because nobody will invest in them, the rest of the money in them, if you can't guarantee the revenues, they will have to pay for the more expensive electricity from the nuclear power stations than they would otherwise be available from renewables. So it really does, it's really odd to imagine. I can see why the Chancellor was a bit stressed by this. It's a really odd proposition to put at this time.
Where do you stand, Tom, on the comments from Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, that in his view, more onshore wind is not really the answer? Build offshore, go gangbusters on offshore, but onshore is not really desirable.
Well, in a way, it's consistent because it's another way of making people pay more than they need to for their electricity. I think he's completely wrong. The fact of the matter is onshore wind is the cheapest power we could get from anywhere. And you can't, on the one hand, be credible saying you think that we shouldn't have more because people don't like it, and then say you should build a nuclear reactor at Sizewell where people are really furious about it. So you can't blame the people for what is actually the deeply confused and incoherent policy.
What are the kinds of incentives that people could be offered? Because I don't think people necessarily want to live next door to a great humming, thudding onshore wind farm. But what are the kinds of incentives that people can be offered to?
Well, I think you have to decide, as government does, what's in the national interest and build what you think is in the national interest, and you deal with that through the normal planning processes. I don't think it's a very good idea to get into bribery of one kind or another.
But don't they offer something in France? I mean, don't they offer, and the boss of Octopus was on earlier saying, we could offer incentives to people to have their energy price cut in half, their electricity price cut in half, if they happen to live within sight of turning turbines.
Well, I don't think you create national cohesion and social cohesion by offering some people bribes and other people's not bribes. I simply think that, and the fact that the French do it, is not necessarily a recommendation to most people in this country. So I think that's a really bad idea. I think it's an idea that sounds good in the headlines, but in practice would create more problems than it actually solves. If you really want to get people's bills down, the things you've got to do first and foremost right now, right this minute, which you could do very fast, is spend the money you promised in the election manifesto on improving energy efficiency in people's homes. In 2012, we were insulating about 2.5 million houses a year. Last year, we insulated 20,000. That's a direct result of government policy. You could simply reverse that policy and you'd be helping people right away today to get their bills down.
Good to speak to you. Tom, thank you. Tom Burke, chair of the E3G think tank, formerly advised the UK government on environmental policy.